Hello and welcome to A Genteel Black Hole, the home of my bookish rambles. My name's Ali, and I've never even been near a woodshed, officer. Welcome to my February reading wrap-up. I will start with a general overview of the month, and then I will review each of the 4 books that I read over the month, and finally a little overview of the music that I listened to and the movies and TV that I watched. There'll be timestamps in the description, so if you want to skip straight ahead to any particular review, feel free. January was a rough month for me, and that sluggish feeling carried over into the first half of February. Thankfully, around the middle of the month, I had an appointment at the respiratory clinic. I came home with a replacement CPAP machine and almost immediately started to feel brighter and more energetic. The gradually lengthening daylight could also have something to do with it. Whatever the reason, I'll take it. I'm massively relieved to finally have the energy to write these wrap-up reviews. I've been focusing on shorter, lower effort videos since the start of the year, so I've really missed making these deep dives into my recent reads. I finished 4 books this month, covering murder mystery, fantasy, drama, and comedy. And thankfully, I had a much better hit rate than January. Admittedly, the last book did lose steam towards the end, but generally, I enjoyed pretty much everything I read. So, let's get diving. I started the month with a reread of The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. This 1936 book is, perhaps unsurprisingly, a murder mystery. It's also the 11th in the Poirot novels series. I haven't been doing the short stories. The novel is narrated by Poirot's trusty, somewhat unimaginative sidekick, Captain Hastings, the Watson to his Holmes. The story begins with an ominous anonymous letter, try saying that 5 times fast, addressed to the great Hercule Poirot. The typewritten letter, simply signed ABC, warns of something happening on the 21st of the month in Andover. The police initially dismiss it as a hoax, but Poirot's little grey cells know better. Vindication comes when, on the morning of the 22nd, shopkeeper Alice Asher from Andover is found dead, killed by a blow to the back of the head. Sitting open on the shop counter is a copy of the ABC Railway Guide. Further taunting letters arrive, each followed by another alphabetical murder. Betty Barnard from Bexhill-on-Sea, and then Sir Carmichael Clark from Churston. As the victims mount up, Poirot forms a support group of bereaved relatives. He hopes that by pooling their resources, he can reveal some hidden connection to these seemingly senseless murders. But can he track down ABC before Murder D? I really enjoyed this book. Agatha Christie really cleverly subverts so many of the classic serial killer tropes. To explain how would be to stray into spoiler territory, so I'll leave you to discover that for yourself, but I will say that on first reading, I didn't guess the solution, and on second reading, I really enjoyed seeing how Christie hid all of the necessary clues in plain sight. It's not quite top-tier Christie for me, but it is an atmospheric and engrossing read with a very satisfying solution. If you're looking for somewhere to start with Christie and you don't want to go the obvious routes like Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and Then There Were None, etc., you could do worse than picking up a copy of ABC Murders. But now, from a Belgian detective to a Norwegian ex-priest. The Wild Duck was one of my favourite reads of last year. In fact, it was in my top 3, which you can watch up here somewhere. So I was really eager to continue exploring the works of Henrik Ibsen. The next play in the collection that I've got was another that I'd never heard of before, Rosmersholm. This 1886 play was written in Danish, not, as I would have expected, Norwegian. I read the English translation by Deborah Dawkin and Erik Skugavig, published by Penguin. Johannes Rosmer is an ex-clergyman. He comes from a long line of powerful and influential Rosmers, and he's inherited the family manor of Rosmersholm. He's haunted by the death by suicide of his wife, Beata, and he now lives in an apparently chaste friendship with Beata's friend, Rebecca West. One day, Beata's brother, the schoolmaster Professor Kroll, comes to visit. He is troubled by the growing liberal movement in the country and hopes to secure Rosmer's support in denouncing it. However, he is shocked to discover that Rosmer has left the church, and he plans on speaking out in favour of liberal reform, with full support from Rebecca. Rosmer hopes, perhaps naively, to remain friends with Kroll despite their political differences, but Kroll declares Rosmer his enemy. He retaliates by publishing a newspaper article which insinuates a romantic affair between Rosmer and Rebecca. But is Rosmer's relationship with Rebecca truly more sexually charged than either of them would admit? And what dark secrets are lurking in their respective pasts, keeping them from succumbing to their mutual attraction? And what of the white horse, the ghostly vision that people say is a harbinger of doom? This play, as you might be able to tell, is very dark and moody. It contains powerful themes about the battle between opposite ends of the political spectrum, between liberation and authoritarianism, and also the struggle to live authentically. I did enjoy it, but not quite with the same fervour that I did The Wild Duck. The central argument between Rosmer and Kroll requires some historical context that I just don't have. So that kept me slightly distanced from the play, however applicable and relevant the general theme may be. The dark secrets that lurk in Rebecca's past were also hinted at, maybe slightly too subtly for me to pick up for myself. It was only when I was watching a documentary about Ibsen a couple of weeks later that I actually realised the full Freudian implications of the whole thing, although actually Ibsen predates Freud, so calling it Freudian's maybe not strictly accurate, but you get it. This does seem to be one of Ibsen's lesser performed plays, at least in the English-speaking world, and I can understand why, but I think maybe seeing it performed, if possible, would improve my appreciation, as would a reread in the future, now that I kind of got to grips with the murky subtext. I'm not sure I would particularly recommend it as an entry point for Ibsen's work, but it is another play that I'm glad to have read, and one that I'd like to revisit in the future, and I do remain very excited to read more Ibsen, especially after that fascinating documentary, which, by the way, is on YouTube, so I'll put a link in the description if you're interested. But now, from white horses to dragons. Next up, I reread The Farthest Shore by Ursula K. Le Guin, originally published in 1972. This is the third book from Le Guin's Earthsea series, and it's always been my least favourite of the series, so I was kind of hesitant to revisit it. The Farthest Shore continues the story of Ged, aka Sparrowhawk, who was first introduced in A Wizard of Earthsea. He's now Archmage of the School of Magic on the island of Roke. Aaron, a young prince on the cusp of manhood, comes to Roke bearing a message, a portent of doom. Magic is leaving Earthsea. Wizards are forgetting the words of their spells, the language of the making. People are even starting to doubt whether magic was ever even real. Ged decides to travel to the outer isles of Earthsea to witness these effects for himself and hopefully root out their cause. He's joined by Aaron, who has pledged allegiance to him. Their travels take them to a city where former magic users now waste away in a drug-induced haze, an island of silk weavers who have forgotten the ways of their craft, and various other hopeless and harrowing sights. Can Ged and Aaron trace the path of destruction to its source? And can they reverse it before magic is drained from Earthsea entirely? Quick spoiler warning here. While I won't be giving away names or specifics of the ending, in order to discuss the book's themes, I do have to give some general spoilers. So if you haven't read this book and you don't want to know any more about it, skip now or forever hold your peas. This book is infused with a sense of heaviness and foreboding that, first time round, made it hard for me to read. The leaking of magic from Earthsea and the apathy it creates in its denizens closely mirrors real-world depression, and at first I found the experience of reading it kind of depressing too. But as I said in a recent video, you can never read the same book twice. On rereading, I started to better understand and appreciate Le Guin's central message. The leak is caused by a powerful wizard who seeks to live forever, to move freely between the worlds of the living and the dead, and to have power over all. But without death, there can be no life, for without an ending, life itself is meaningless. To quote Le Guin's own poem, "Only in silence the word, only in dark the light, only in dying life, bright the hawk's flight on the empty sky." As someone who has struggled with the very idea of mortality ever since I first understood it as a child, this is a hard message to hear, but an important one to take to heart. If you spend your whole life afraid of dying, you never really live. And the antagonist, in denying his own mortality and seeking both endless power and endless growth, represents the very mindset we see in our political leaders and big business owners today. This book speaks to us as clearly now as it ever has, and revisiting it reminded me of why I consider Ursula K. Le Guin one of the finest writers who's ever put pen to paper. Also, there are dragons. Did I mention there's dragons? It's important to me that you know there are dragons. And Le Guin's dragons are probably my favourite dragons in all of fiction. And I love dragons. I mean, I love dragons. I've said dragons too many times now. Dragons. I'm happy to say that The Farthest Shore is no longer my least favourite book of Earthsea. In fact, I don't think I have a least favourite book of Earthsea anymore. I put off reading this for about a year after rereading The Tombs of Atuan, but now I find myself eager to continue my journey through the books of Earthsea. If you haven't read Le Guin before, this, being the third book in the series, is obviously not the place to start, but I highly recommend her books, both for the fictional world she created and the profound philosophy with which she infused them. And that brings me to my last book of the month, and there's something nasty in the woodshed. Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons was originally published in 1932. This was Gibbons' debut novel and my first time reading her, so I was pleasantly surprised by just how funny this book is. It is, at least in part, a parody of the kind of rural melodramas that were very popular between the First and Second World Wars, particularly the works of Mary Webb and Sheila K. Smith, neither of whom I'm at all familiar with, and, frankly, neither are most modern readers. My best frame of reference is a couple of generations earlier, because I recently read Thomas Hardy's Far from the Madding Crowd, and yeah, that was as good a primer as anything, really. Cold Comfort Farm tells the story of Flora Post, a modern young woman who finds herself suddenly orphaned. However, she hardly ever saw her jet-setting parents, and consequently wastes no time mourning them. She starts writing to distant relatives, looking for someone to stay with and maybe play fairy godmother to. The only invitation she receives, however, is from the Starkadder family, residents of the ominous Cold Comfort Farm near the fictional Sussex town of Howling. The farm is presided over by the reclusive Aunt Ada Doom. She hardly ever emerges from her room, preferring to stay hidden away because, as a child, she saw something nasty in the woodshed. Side note, I ended up with Something for the Weekend by the Divine Comedy playing on a loop in my head for most of the week that I read this. If you know, you know. Other relatives include Amos Starkadder, a fire and brimstone preacher from the Church of the Quivering Brethren, and his wife, Judith. There's also their sons, Reuben, who runs the farm, and Seth, a brooding and oversexed Heathcliff type. And there's a host of other extended family members and farmhands, each with their own peculiar problem for Flora to solve with her modern, practical city ways, or meddling, you might call it. If you're the sort of person who often complains about stories by using the phrase, "Why didn't they just?" Flora is the heroine for you. She can see all of the tropes and cliches waiting to happen, and she simply can't be doing with them. She's basically an editor for the tragedy of the Starkadders, averting every disaster with common sense and absolutely no regard for dramatic conventions. If she lived in Middle-earth, you can bet the hobbits would be flying all the way to Mount Doom by Eagle and back home in time for second breakfast. This book also has a delightful streak of absurdist humour. Gibbons replicates the feeling of reading a sort of too well-researched rural novel by inventing her own nonsense slang terms and agricultural jargon, while Adam the farmhand is using a thorn twig to cletter the dishes. Reuben is out ploughing the fields with a scranlet. It's enough to make you choke on a snood of porridge. That said, in the second half of the book, it does start to lose steam for me. Once all of the Starkadder's hilarious eccentricities are established, all that really remains is to watch Flora avert each disaster, and the sensible kind of anticlimactic solutions didn't really tickle me the way the problems did. And while all of the nonsense terms made me laugh the first few times, not many new ones were added to the repertoire in the second half. So after a while, all of the klettering and cowdling kind of got a bit repetitive. Weirdly, there's also just a pinch of science fiction. The foreword mentions kind of offhandedly that the novel takes place in the near future, but all that really amounts to is the occasional bit of anachronistic technology. There's a few, video calls and air taxis, but Gibbons does so little with it. I'm not really sure why she included it at all. Overall, I did enjoy the book, but in the end, I also found myself just kind of disappointed. It had been shaping up to be a potential new favourite, but somewhere along the line, I just started to lose that initial excitement. I'd still say it was very good, though, especially as a sort of antidote to Far From the Madding Crowd. God knows I needed an antidote to that. But there are some kind of odd creative choices that stop me from loving it unreservedly. But your mileage may vary, so if this sounds good to you, don't let me put you off trying it. My first 3 books of the month were actually read in tandem with another, Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, translated by Richard Pevere and Larissa Volokonsky. This is my first experience of Tolstoy, and so far I've been pleasantly surprised by just how readable it is. The sheer length of the book is still a challenge, and in fact I've had to put it on pause for a moment, because it turns out that I can't keep up tandem reading for very long before getting overwhelmed. But the actual prose is much more clear and vivid than I was expecting. The book is divided into 8 parts, and I've finished the first before putting it on hold for a while. I'll save my full thoughts for when I finish the whole thing. But yeah, it's certainly off to a promising start. I'm also still reading David Copperfield, just a chapter here and there. And I'm also enjoying that a lot. But I don't have the time or energy to pick it up very often, so progress is very slow. I also have a couple of anthologies on the go. Like David Copperfield, I'm just picking these up occasionally of an afternoon. One is a poetry collection and the other is short stories. They're both suited to very short reading sessions, and they both provide me with self-contained pieces to enjoy in isolation, rather than trying to keep track of a prolonged story like David Copperfield or Anna Karenina. The poetry anthology I've been reading is this pocket hardback, Poems of the Sea. As the title might suggest, they're all sea-themed poems. I always forget how much I love poetry until I start reading it again. And yeah, I've been having a great time with this one. My favourite poem I read in February was The World Below the Brine by Walt Whitman. I loved it so much, I read it like 6 times in a row. I mean, I read every poem in the book like twice, just so I kind of feel like I've grasped it. But that one, yeah, I really loved it. In fact, so much that I've ordered a copy of Leaves of Grass. Can't believe I hadn't read any Walt Whitman before. Bloody hell. And the short story collection is Top Science Fiction, which you might have seen my video about going to the bookshop and buying this. And yeah, I finally made a start on it. And I'm really enjoying it. I barely read any sci-fi last year. I just completely lost the taste for it. So I was really hoping that that short story collection would kind of ease me back into it. And so far, yeah, it's having the desired effect. There's 25 stories in the book, and at time of recording this, I've read 5 of them. And yeah, I've really enjoyed all of them. So yeah, rousing success so far. I'm really glad to have started kind of regaining my love of sci-fi, because I was a little bit disconcerted by how much I'd lost the taste for it. Once I've finished the collection, I might make a video about it, maybe reviewing it or ranking each story or something like that. No promises though, but we'll see. According to my TARDIS notebook, in February I watched 17 episodes of Taxi, which was like most of season 4, 4 episodes of Only Connect, 4 of The Great Pottery Throwdown, 2 episodes of Cheers, which took me to the end of season 4, and also 2 episodes of Make Some Noise. I also watched 3 films. A decade ago, that would have been a shockingly low number for me, but now I'm quite pleased. First was An Inspector Calls, the 1956 adaptation of J.B. Priestley's play. We studied that play in school, though I appreciate its anti-capitalist message far more now than I did at the time. The film version is okay. Alistair Sim is great as the titular inspector, but the rest of the cast don't really approach his level. And the film also indulges in one of my pet hates for cinematic adaptations of stage plays. It adds extra scenes to illustrate things that were merely described in the play. Sometimes show don't tell is bad, actually. One of my all-time favourite films, 12 Angry Men, proves just how gripping it can be to watch people describe things that you can't see. I really wish this film had done that too. It would be far more effective to just watch the Burling family give their evidence to the inspector without ever seeing the face of the girl they're talking about. The next film I watched was The Boy and the Heron, the latest film by one of my favourite directors, the Studio Ghibli co-founder Hayao Miyazaki. I loved Studio Ghibli, and Miyazaki especially, ever since I first saw Spirited Away like 20 years ago. So I was thrilled that he'd come out of retirement to make one last film. And given that it's all about a young boy struggling with grief after the loss of his mother, I was primed to connect deeply with it. So I was kind of disappointed that I didn't. While the animation is stunning as ever, the plot is kind of vague and confusing, and the whole thing just kept me at arm's length. It's a rare letdown from Miyazaki. So, yeah, that was pretty disappointing. Finally, I watched another film adapted from a play, The Birdcage from 1996. This is one of my bestie Rachel's favourite films, so I've been meaning to watch it for ages, and I'm really glad I finally did, because it's an absolute delight. It stars Robin Williams and Nathan Lane as a gay couple. Robin Williams, as Armand, owns a drag club, and Nathan Lane, as Albert, is the star attraction. One day they get a visit from Val, Armand's son, and Val has big news. He's engaged. But the girl's father, played by Gene Hackman, is an ultra-conservative Republican senator. So Val asks his out-and-proud parents to go temporarily back in the closet when his future in-laws come to dinner. Nathan Lane gives an incredible performance in this film. It's hilarious, but it's also deeply poignant. The scene where Albert shows up in a suit and tie and laments that it makes him even more obvious, it brought a tear to my eye. I don't know why it took me so long to finally watch The Birdcage, but I'm really glad I did. Also, by a strange coincidence, I watched it just a few days before Gene Hackman's death was announced, so that's kind of spooky. Very sad news. I also listened to 32 albums, 9 of which were new to me. My most played artists were Gentle Giant with 7 albums, Deerhoof with 4, Bella Bartok with 2, Thelonious Monk with 2, and Led Zeppelin with 2. And I also listened to 1 album each by Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, Black Ends, Cheer Accident, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Field Music, Helium, John Adams, the Martha's Vineyard Ferries, Mary Timony, My Bloody Valentine, Papa M, Paul McCartney, Paul Simon, Philip Glass, Steve Reich, and Van de Graaff Generator. My favourite albums of the month were Music for Strings, Percussion and Celesta by Bella Bartok, Monk's Music by Thelonious Monk, Plum by Field Music, and Offend Maggie by Deerhoof. So that's everything that I read, watched and listened to in February. And yeah, it was a big improvement over January in just about every way. Better books, better moods, more energy. So yeah, here's hoping that continues into March. But how about you? Why not let me know in the comments what you've been reading lately, or who's your favourite short story writer, or what's your favourite film based on a play, or, whatever else you may want to tell me. I'm always happy to hear from you. But that's about it from me today. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I will see you when I see you.